I make my speech from here, so that's not a problem. So I have a 15-minute speech.
You have a 15-minute speech too. Okay, because the idea was to have a conversation.
So I should not make the speech.
Ich glaube, es ist im Programm vorgesehen, sogar 20 Minuten.
Ja, ich habe hier 15 bis 20 Minuten, deswegen ist es schwierig.
Das ist alles, was so vorgesehen war.
I didn't know, because the model was, but apparently they agree with you, you can make the presentation and then there are
But it's difficult to have
with if you prefer just to have a conversation with
podiums.
yes.
Have the micro and then this to make the speech.
Yeah, because the initial model was a conversation. We know that they have agreed that with you. But now you prefer to just do the conversation and the interview or have the interview?
I'm open. Normally I agree to what you want. So let's not make a problem about it now, but
So welcome everybody, in particular welcome to President Pöttering. This is the first of a series of conversations that the new flagship project of the European University Institute, the School of Transnational Governance, is organizing with what we describe as leaders beyond the state. And in particular, we start by interviewing former presidents of the European institutions. We have a great lineup for this year, and we could not start better than with a real leader beyond the state, President Pöttering, that is with us here today. The model of this initiative of the School of Transnational Governance involves an interview that is conducted by members of the History Department and the archives of the European Union that is then left in the archives of the European Union, but also this second part of the interview that is a public part of the interview, and that it includes a panel of European University Institute researchers from different departments that I want to thank for their availability to coming and participate in this different format, and moderated by a journalist that will also have the opportunity to put follow-up questions and to conclude with some final questions. I think, doesn't take much to present President Pöttering. As I said, he is genuinely a European politician, one of the few politicians that is more a European politician even than a national politician. He was elected in the first elections to the European Parliament, and I think he was the only member of the European Parliament that stayed in office for all those mandates until 2014. That's a remarkable career and makes him really a unique case in terms of a genuine European politician. And within all those years, he also had the opportunity of being both first chairman of the European People's Party in the European Parliament, and then president of the European Parliament. And as president of the European Parliament, he lived the experience not only of enlargement, with all the opportunity and enthusiasm that entailed to the European Union, but also the challenges included in that process. And then the crisis, or the beginning of the crisis that he had to deal with as president of the European Parliament, the economic and financial crisis in the European Union. So he has first-hand experience, not only on politics beyond the state, but on leadership in the most difficult moments that have taken place in the European Union in recent years. And he remains very committed to European issues and to the European debate. He is chairman of the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation, a position that he will soon be leaving. But also, he remains very active on the debates, and by participating, and I can show you because I have proof of that, he's just recently published a paper with some, I would say, pretty audacious and bold proposals on the future of the European Union, on matters that goes from reinforcing European policy in the area of refugees and migration to the creation of a European Monetary Fund, also to the development of a European digital single market. It is a paper that indeed presents a blueprint for the future of the European Union that I'm sure will be part of this conversation too. I don't know if President Pöttering, you might want to start with a few comments for you to decide, or we start immediately with the conversation, but I'll leave it for you to decide. Thank you very much.
Yes, I think maybe we leave President Pöttering the opportunity to give a speech, and then we would go to the questions, and maybe if we have time, a little interview with me, and then we were open to the floor. President Pöttering.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tonia Mastrobuoni, and thank you very much, Professor Maduro and President De Hoes and Professor Badi, for having the opportunity to speak to you. I'm a little bit in a difficult situation now, because it was agreed that I make a 15-minute speech, and so it's a little bit difficult to make a speech having the micro in one hand and the paper in the other, but I will try to do my best, and so I give you my ideas, and I will try to read my paper, and then we have our discussion. So at least this was agreed. But if you want just to ask questions, I'm open to that as well. But you prefer that I make my speech 50 minutes. Okay. So today, 60 years after the signing of the Treaties of Rome, 28 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Iron Curtain that divided Europe, 13 years after the eastward expansion of the European Union, 8 years after the Treaty of Lisbon came into force, and regrettable though it is, a good year following the Brexit referendum, it is clear that the project for the peaceful unification of Europe is currently going through a rather difficult phase. The demands on the European unification project are massive. On the one hand, citizens understandably expect the European Union to provide them with protection from current risks and dangers, while at the same time shaping a common future together. They expect protection from terrorism, war and conflicts, yet also from the negative consequences of pervasive digitization and globalization. They expect the European Union to act as an anchor of stability in a region characterized by instability and war. This expectation is reinforced further by the uncertainties associated with the current political landscape in the United States under President Donald Trump. But presidents come and go, like governments come and go. This is hopefully, from my side, a positive indication. The individual member states of the European Union would be overstretched and struggle to meet these expectations if they each had to manage them on their own. At the same time, the citizens of Europe, or I should rather say of the European Union, expect the European Union to take a leading role in shaping the future. This includes preparing a united Europe for the digital age and securing our economic and social security system through modernization, set against the background of changing demographics. But you as a young generation can change still the demographics. Only by remaining globally competitive can we help shape global norms and standards of protection. The Treaty of Lisbon, the country Portugal of Professor Maduro, the legal foundation of the European Union, speaks of the competitive social market economy in this context. Support for a stronger role of the European Union is definitely in place. A clear majority of German citizens, 85%, and also of European citizens, 75%, for example, support a common security and defense policy in the European Union. 82% of German citizens and 66% of European citizens would welcome a formal foreign policy among the states of the European Union. And I think Federica Mogherini is doing well to achieve this goal. At the same time, however, the present state of the European Union is viewed significantly more critically. There are considerable doubts as to its capacity to act. An indistinct feeling of alienation and dissatisfaction among the European population is being exacerbated by a whole range of negative developments in the recent years. These include the financial and sovereign debt crisis of several countries in the Eurozone, the refugee crisis, and the brutal terrorist attacks of the last few years and months. The gap between expectations in terms of the European Union's performance on the one hand and reality on the other ultimately serves to undermine public support for European unification. The European Union is therefore increasingly being exposed to a social nationalistic dialogue by its populist opponents, a mix of untenable economic and socio-political promises as well as a nationalistic, often racist rhetoric. The Brexit referendum held in June 2016, which I mentioned before, was also a heavy blow for the European Union. But on the other hand side, we have to see, and we have to welcome it, that the remaining 27 countries stay together, and this is a great hope for the future. Although opponents of Europe and its system of values have been able to record several regrettable successes, their rise is not inexorable, as underlined by recent national elections, for example in Austria and the Netherlands, and especially with the election of Emmanuel Macron in France. So these are positive elements. In September, Germany elected a new parliament, and in my former papers was always elected a new government, and I deleted that because a parliament was elected and we are still in the process of forming a government, and if you want to ask questions, it can take still some time. So I wouldn't say we are following the Italian example. You have very soon a government, but then there is a new government. So, and we have always government longer in office, but now it's for the first time that it takes such a long time to form a government. Allow me to say a few words about this. However, the fact that the so-called Alternative for Germany, a right-wing populist party with nationalistic, racist and also anti-Semitic tendencies became the third force in German politics is certainly rather alarming. Let me be completely clear about this. There is no place for misanthropy in Germany or in the German Bundestag, the German parliament. No place for xenophobia, no place for Islamophobia. No place for rejecting human beings who come to us as refugees asking for help. No place for smear campaigns against those of different faiths. No place for hate towards other cultures. These concepts are neither patriotic nor European. 60% of those who voted for Alternative for Germany did so out of disappointment with the other parties. Indeed, 85% of this party's voters believe the Alternative for Germany to be the only party that allows them to express their protest, in particular against the German government's refugee policy. And my party, the Christian Democratic Union, lost 1 million votes, together with the sister party of Bavaria, 1 million votes to the AfD, to the Alternative for Germany. And this shows that those 1 million cannot be totally unreasonable because they voted for my party before, but you have not the similar figures from the Socialist Party, but even from the very left, the former communists, you have many voting now for this Alternative for Germany. When citizens vote for a party like this due to worries, concerns or fears, our duty as Democrats is to examine and determine the root causes of this, not simply dismiss them. We need to take the worries and fears of our citizens seriously. We need to address these worries and fears. We need to listen and highlight solutions. This will allow us to expose the often simplistic arguments of the populists and once again provide people with a sense of orientation. As an establishment for political education, we at the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, Konrad-Adenauer Foundation, also see this as our mission. At European level, just like 60 years ago, we must learn the correct lessons from the setbacks and defeats we have suffered. Lessons as to how we can reform the European Union and also how we talk about the European Union. And Professor Maduro, I thank him that he showed this paper. I don't know how many copies you have, but you could perhaps, if the students or you are not students, you are doctorates and postgraduates, so if you want the paper, we certainly can arrange it. So what needs to be done? And I know my answers are not 100% answers, but you will find the 100% answers yourself. Turning away from the road to unity and moving towards renationalization would be a fatal turn down the wrong path. Instead, we must profess our political identities. Homeland, in my German language we say Heimat, Fatherland, European Union. This all goes hand in hand and is not a contradiction. We must also show great strength in defending our common European currency, the euro. Leaving the single currency would have incalculable consequences for the economy of every member state in the European Union, no matter how large or small. The reintroduction of barriers, border controls and exchange bureaus would not only be felt on a daily basis by every European, it would also mark the return to an approach that once manifested some of Europe's greatest catastrophes. And allow me to give you a personal experience. It was the 21st of December 2007 that I was present as President of the European Parliament at the border to Poland when the barriers were taken away. And it came into my mind what borders meant in the history between Poland and Germany. There were borders, soldiers came mainly from Germany, and the result was that there was war between Germany and Poland and the aggression of Hitler and all this. And now we are living together in a community of values, and we should never forget, although this is already it's exactly 10 years ago, that it's a miracle, at least of my time, that we are living together with the Polish, with the Baltic countries, which were part of the Soviet Union, and other countries living together now in the European Union. And this is, at least for my generation, a miracle of our time, and that's why we should be optimistic, and we have all hopes to meet the challenges we are facing today. What we need is a Europe of results now. The European Union must today make a contribution to protecting its citizens. However, it must also set the course for the future. In this context, allow me to use the example of joint control of external borders in the European Union, creation of a common asylum policy, as well as more effective design of instruments to facilitate regulated immigration. The member states of the European Union also need to show solidarity with the countries taking in the largest numbers of refugees. And I'm very critical in this context to my own country. We as Germans only understood the difficulties for Italy and Greece as far as migration is concerned when we had our problems as well starting in 2015. And my deep conviction is, if a country of the European Union, like in this case Italy and Greece, have a major problem with migration, this is not only a problem for Italy and Greece, it's a problem and a challenge for all of us, and solidarity demands to solve these challenges, and I hope that we can do this. We must work together as Europeans on eliminating the causes of flight and migration, above all in the countries of origin. And we know how difficult this is. In addition to this, we need to provide active support for the processes of democratization and modernization in our neighboring countries to the east and south as a way of helping make these countries more politically and economically robust and stable. To the east, for us as Germans, Ukraine is there, and to the south, of course, the north of Africa, and we know how difficult it is to have a stable situation, for instance, in Libya. Provision of economic aid to these countries in the form of partnerships for reform, investment and dismantling of trade barriers for imports of their products into the European Union can only be undertaken effectively together. When it comes to the challenges posed by war and terrorism, no member state of the European Union can work effectively or successfully on its own. We therefore need closer foreign policy coordination. A great deal has already happened in this regard over the last few months. We have been operating common coastal and border protection for several months and will soon also have a European Defence Fund to develop a common European defence strategy in a step-by-step process. And this is exactly what Jean Monnet has told us, that European integration follows when there are special problems and challenges, and we hopefully find common solution for this. However, we can still do a lot more, particularly in the field of security. This includes closer cooperation between security agencies as well as improved data exchange for counterterrorism purposes. The EU cannot afford to rest on its laurels and simply react to crisis. Instead, our goal must be to act, to show leadership in our community, as well as help actively shape global developments. And just an idea is coming into my mind, seeing the German situation with only a government which is not really elected at the moment, that we need strong European institutions. We will always have problems on the national levels, governments coming and going, but we need strong European institutions who can act for all of us. This requires stronger integration of the military structures of the member states with the objective of creating a European army. The aim here should not be to replace NATO, but rather to establish this European army as a pillar within NATO. NATO remains important for security throughout Europe, regardless who is the president of the United States. So we need partnership with the United States and of course with Canada as well. However, a European defense union should be our objective. At the same time, we must also strengthen the non-military aspects of security. This means that the EU's budget must become more future-oriented and better reflect the EU's priorities for action. In other words, spending on the migration policy, foreign policy and security policy must be increased. At the same time, the European Union's budget could become more flexible to allow faster reactions to crises and challenges. In addition to this, the European Union should make a contribution to establishing a digital single market as a way of ensuring its own sustainability. A European employment agency could increase the permeability of the national labor markets and contribute to improving placement services within Europe. All of these practical measures would represent important steps, but are not enough on their own. The European Union must see itself far more as a community of values, at the heart of which sits the dignity of every individual. The European Union needs to move away from its defensive position and go on the offensive with powerful arguments against populists and nationalists, both within and outside Europe. Euroscepticism, with its fears and warnings of downfall, needs to be countered with an optimistic European response of hope and a positive future. Both the member states of the European Union and its citizens must see themselves as a community of common values. However, this does not mean denying cultural, religious, or social traditions of the member states. Quite the contrary, in fact. And Italy is not united in the sense that you have everywhere the same local and cultural background. The north of Italy is different to the south, and even Firenze is different to Milano. And I think this is the richness of our continent, that we try to unite on the basis of our different diversity, Being in a community of values actually means returning to the common core of basic values associated with European unification. For example, human dignity, freedom, democracy, justice and peace. The principles of solidarity and subsidiarity must guide us here. And you don't want to be governed only by Rome, you want to have your own decisions here in Firenze. So this is another example, and if you always depend on Rome, you might once in a while wait for a long time to get solutions. But this is the same in Germany. If you wait too long for decisions in Berlin, you might not solve your local challenges. Unity in diversity is our guiding principle for the 500 million people in the European Union. At the same time, we must promote understanding of the need for European identity and better convey our common European history. Without knowledge of history, I think the bad examples of European history, the tragedies of our continent, without knowledge of our history, the tragic developments of our continent could come into our future again. The House of European History, which I initiated and was opened next to the European Parliament in Brussels in May by President Antonio Tajani, should help here. It's a place that conveys the key aspects of European history as a way of understanding more recent history and the present day. A place that represents the common values of European unification as progress in peaceful coexistence. A place for dialogue that is intended to encourage citizens to get more involved in European decision-making processes. A place that shows us why we can be proud of what has been achieved in Europe to date, like this institute here in Firenze. So I think it's very complementary to what you are doing here and studying here in this beautiful institute. We can learn from European history and also the events of the last few years. After all, a united Europe did not come about in one fell swoop. It is far more a step-by-step process that is still ongoing and has sometimes also required detours. It is therefore important not to allow the expectations of citizens to become unrealistic and instead to push for patience. We need an intelligent combination, and you are all intelligent. We need an intelligent combination of passion and patience to make European unity a reality. And finally, admittedly, European Union is not a paradise on earth, but only Firenze and these surrounding seems to be very near to a paradise. However, in comparison with other regions all over the globe, it is among the better parts of our one world. Preserving, refining and guiding this into a positive future is a political, yet primarily also moral obligation, both for us and future generations. And you, most of you, are the generation of the 21st century, and I wish you that you always can live in a European society that is based on the dignity of the human being, democracy, freedom, legal order, and peace. This is my wish for you and all of us in the 21st century. And thank you so much, and I apologize that I had to read my paper under not so 100% conditions, but I hope you could understand what I meant and I wanted to say to you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Pöttering. I'm very happy to conduct this first of a series of interviews with the former presidents of the European institutions. I think it's a wonderful project of the new School of Transnational Governance. I'm also very proud to be here because of a biographic detail, because I was born in Brussels. My mother worked for 43 years for the European Commission. My father is Italian, but I was grown up by two parents, an Italian and a German, one who always said, you're first a European, and then you're German, and then you're Italian, or then you're Italian, then you're German. So I'm very happy to be here. Because of the bad questions or what? No. Our interview will go on with three, like a sort of game, I would say. You have 10 minutes each, the researchers, to speak with Mr. Pöttering, and then we will go to, I will maybe have the time to pose some questions, and then we will go to the floor. So the first 10 minutes, I think we agreed this, Mr. Benedetto Zaccaria. He's a research associate of the Department of History and Civilization. So the microphone is yours. 10 minutes. Ah, no, you have one. Yes, perfect. You have 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Tonia, and good evening, President Pöttering. So I'm dealing with history, so I will cover the historical part of this interview. My first question starts from what Professor Maduro said about the fact that you served in the European Parliament from 1979 to 2014. So from an historical viewpoint, this is a very rich source of information for historians. My first question deals with the European Parliament as an institution, but as we don't have the time to assess the evolution of this institution. Now, I would like to ask you briefly, what are, in your views, the main achievement of the European Parliament over this period and the main failure of the European Parliament during this period?
Okay, thank you very much, Benedetto. First, I think you were not born. I'm sure you were not born when we had our first European elections. I'm sorry, having a little bit of doubt as far as this is concerned.
I was born with the European Single Act.
With a single A, so in 87. So it's good to know. It's 87?
86.
86, yes, it was an ongoing process. Yes. So when I was a candidate to the European elections in 79, we had a phrase in the German language, and Tonia may remember, you will not remember, but you may have heard it. Hast du einen Opa? Opa means grandfather. Do you have a grandfather? Schick ihn nach Europa, send him to Europe. So in German it's rather funny. Hast du einen Opa? Schick ihn nach Europa. So only people of my age now were not only, I was an exemption, were candidates for the European Parliament. So with the principles of 79, I could be a candidate now for the next election in 2019. But of course I will not be. But to be serious, I was asked very often, mainly by my party members, and you have friends in your own party, not only competitors. They ask, what do you want to do in Brussels and in Strasbourg? You have nothing to say there. And you should go to the German parliament in Bonn at that time. And my answer always has been, we will fight for our competences in the European Parliament, and there were so great personalities present, those like Leo Tinnemans and others, and they really became good friends. And I said, we will fight for our competences. And with a single act, when you were born in 86, it must have been a present for your birth, we started to include the European Parliament in the process of legislation. And then with the Treaty of Maastricht in 92, we got the co-decision in some fields where there was majority voting in the Council. And so the European Parliament always fought for two things. That is majority voting in the Council and then co-decision in the European Parliament. But we did not get it in one step. We succeeded to get majority voting in some areas without co-decision. But then with the next treaty with Amsterdam, we got more co-decision for the Parliament and less majority voting in the Council. And with the Lisbon Treaty, which substituted the Constitutional Treaty, which unfortunately, as you all know here, failed in a referendum, firstly in May 2005 in France, and then in 2 weeks later, I think, or 1 week later in the Netherlands in June. Then the Lisbon Treaty replaced the Constitutional Treaty, and so we have now almost in all fields of European legislation the co-decision process, except in the question of taxes. There you still have the unanimous vote in the Council, unfortunately, and if you have unanimous vote in the Council, then co-decision really does not make sense. So I think this is the greatest effort. Where did we fail? This is difficult to say, but I think we did not make so far so much progress which we would have liked to in foreign policy and defense. I was chairman of the subcommittee Security and Disarmament from 84 to 94, so this is a millennium ago. And people laughed at us when we started to discuss these questions of security and defense. But now there are progresses, and you know the defense ministers of the European Union met. This is an extraordinary progress when I look back to the starting point of the direct elected European Parliament. You could not imagine to have meetings of defense ministers in the so-called European Economic Community. And now you have meetings of defense ministers, and they agreed on, I think, 15 very concrete projects. And the foreign ministers agreed to that, I think, yesterday or the day before. And the European Council will give its agreement, I think, in 1 or 2 weeks. So this is a great progress. The European Union is unfinished, and everything in our personal life and political life is unfinished. But I think we are on the right track, and in this case, the present American president might be a reason to help us Europeans to be united, and his counterpart in the Kremlin as well. So let's be sure that we have our own responsibility. Let's not wait for Moscow or Washington. Let's be ready to accept our own responsibility. I'm sorry that my answer was a little bit too long, but the quality of your question was so high that I have to give an answer which might have been a little bit too long.
Okay, thank you. Second question about your personal experience. As a historian, I would like to ask you, who were, 3 names of political figures who shaped your European vocation and European engagement, and what we can learn from them?
The decisive person certainly was Konrad-Adenauer, and I said it this morning in the interview with Professor Badi. There is in my personal case, and I beg your pardon if I say it, a personal background. My father was a simple soldier in the Second World War, and he was killed in Eastern Germany, which is now Western Poland, in February 1945. I was born in September 45, so I never saw him. And I think this is the psychology which I did not, of course, never understand when I was a child or a young boy, that I wanted to live in a society of peace. And Konrad Adenauer, the first German chancellor after the war, who was very much against Hitler and very much against the National Socialists, he started together with Alcide de Gasperi, Robert Schuman, Jean Monnet and others, the European integration policy, which in its core meant peace. And I think Konrad Adenauer, with his policy, influenced me very strongly. And later, of course, Helmut Kohl and others, Jacques Delors, a great figure, and it was great to have this close cooperation between the Christian Democrat Helmut Kohl and the socialist Mitterrand. But there were great political leaders here in Italy, and the greatest, I think, was Alcide de Gasperi.
So I think the next round of questions goes to Birgit Aser. She's PhD researcher, Department of Law. Or what do she's first? Okay. So I'm sorry. So Julia Schulte-Kloos, is it right? PhD researcher, Department of Political and Social Science. You will have your floor for it.
Thank you very much. So political scientists talking about the European Parliament elections often refer to these elections as second-order contests. And that term has been coined already remarkably early, like 1 year after the first EP elections in 1979. Of course, you already spoke about the change in the powers of the Parliament that you have witnessed. But nevertheless, I would say the EP elections remain second-order up until today, in that they still don't lead to a government formation, that public interest in the election is still on a very low level, and within some European countries, only a quarter of the eligible voters actually bother to turn out and to cast a vote. So do you believe that the architects of the EP direct elections were too optimistic or even idealistic? in not considering that the institution of direct elections would potentially introduce certain voting dynamics that are very different from what to expect from national voting behavior?
Of course, we all would like to see a participation in European elections of 80% or even more. But at least in Germany, we don't have it even for national elections. And we see on the local level, when they elect the local representatives, even what we call a governor of a district, sometimes there's only a participation of 35%. So this is not an excuse concerning the European elections, but I want to say it's not only the case that we have this small participation, that we don't have it only in European elections, we have it in other elections as well, and this is a problem of democracy. And I would like, I wish that in the future, and we have to make an effort, that the participation in European elections becomes bigger again, because we have to show to our population the importance of the European Union for solving the problems. So having said that, I think we have to make an effort to show to the people the importance of European elections. And we should not make a contradiction between the different levels of politics. I think the local level has the same importance as the national level and the European level. All those three levels and the regional level, they belong together. And the mistake we have made in Germany, and I think here in Italy as well, and the worst case is Britain, that's why they are leaving the European Union, that we always criticize the European institutions or Brussels. Brussels is a bad guy for all the problems which are not solved on the European level. I don't say that Brussels does not make mistakes, and in the past, certainly the European institutions, especially the European Commission, dealt with too many questions which should be solved on the national or the regional or the local level. But our governments on the national level, they are part of the decision process, and when decisions in Brussels are criticized nationally, they say, yeah, these were decisions in Brussels, but they were part of the decision process. And so I say we need more transparency for that. And if I would be in Germany now, or I can say it here as well, of course, Brussels makes mistakes, Rome makes mistakes, or in my case, in German, Berlin makes mistakes. Only there is one city where everything is fine, that is Firenze, here where we are. And then people start to laugh, and then they know that this is not true. And so I think we should be more fair or fairer. More fair, I think, is the English word. More fair to the decision process in Brussels. And I think the Juncker administration goes a good way, that the Vice President, Franz Timmermans, is responsible for all those proposals which are coming to the table of the European Commission. So not all projects come immediately to the table of the Assembly of the Commission. Franz Timmermans is responsible to decide what finally comes into the legislative process. And I think the more we learn from our mistakes, the more we can hopefully convince our citizens. And when we solve those challenges like the external border. The external border, the control of the external border is a consequence of Schengen, of the free movement in the European Union. But in the past we have not done enough to control the external borders, which should not lead to a wall. They must be open for asylum seekers, for legal immigration. And if we solve the problems and in defense and so on, then hope step by step the European citizens in the European Union will see and recognize the importance of the European Union, and hopefully this will increase the participation. President Deus, I think you in Belgium, you have compulsory voting system. You have to vote. So I would not recommend this, but you have a participation of more than 80%. Okay, so we would like to have a voluntary participation, And if you look to the United States, with how many votes the president is elected, one would be astonished. And even Hillary Clinton got 3 million votes more than Donald Trump, but this is another question. This concerns the election system of the United States of America. It's even there not perfect, and it's not certainly not perfect in the European Union, but we have to work on that.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, you kind of elaborated a lot on like whether people vote and participate in those elections, but we haven't really yet spoken about differences in voting dynamics and when it comes how people vote, like which parties they support. Because of the low importance of those elections and because there's little at stake, voters tend to use those votes at the EP elections also to punish their national governments and to cast so-called protest votes, right? Especially when such an EP election falls in the middle of a national electoral cycle. That's what political scientists have studied a lot. So we have witnessed that many populist right forces actually enjoyed their first electoral success in the EP elections and only later gained power nationally. So whether it is the Front National in France, the Dutch Freedom Party, or even the AfD in Germany, that like half a year later, after just failing to enter the German parliament in 2013, had a remarkable success in the European arena. So what is it about the EP elections that kind of favor such an anti-European discourse? And should we consider whether the institution of the EP elections potentially even fueled that so-called, as you said, populist opponents of the European project kind of undermine the spirit of further European integration?
When we have regional elections in Germany, the people are not free to decide not on a national level. When they vote for the regional parliament of my region, Lower Saxony, they always have in mind the national politics as well. So this is not something very special for the European Parliament. And when the people vote for the European Parliament, they take in consideration their national policy as well. So it's always a combination. And I have always defended the idea that the winner of the elections of the European Parliament should be represented in the head of the Commission. So the President of the European Commission should represent the result of the European elections. And to give you an example, and we discussed it with Professor Badi this morning when he asked me questions for 1.5 half hours, so I'm used to it to get questions, Julia. So now, to make things sure, I am a good friend now of Romano Prodi, but he was in 1999 the candidate of the council to become president of the commission. We, for the first time as EPP, ED group, ED stands for the British Conservatives, who were part of our group, and that's why I might have got my white hair earlier than otherwise, but you can get white hair with Christian Democrats as well. And I think it's the same with socialists or social democrats, liberals and greens. But anyhow, that's not my point. So Romano Prodi, we were for the first time the by far largest group, but Romano Prodi did not belong to us. He left Democrazia Cristiana and he went to middle left. I was not strong enough when I was elected the 13th of July 1999 as chairman of our group, not strong enough to prevent him to become president of the commission. It was totally different in 2004. It was not Prodi anymore, it was then Verhofstadt and Barroso, but this is not my story now. I speak about Prodi. And so I could not prevent him, but he is a clever man and a wise man, intelligent man. And we agreed on 5 points with Romano Prodi, that he accepted. For instance, if we as Parliament ask for the dismission of a commissioner, that a commissioner should leave the commission, he agreed that he would ask the commissioner to leave if the Parliament wants it. And so before the confidence vote for the whole commission, Romano Prodi asked all candidates for the commission, would you retire if I ask you? And of course they all said yes, because they wanted to become a commissioner. And the tragic situation for the predecessor of Romano Prodi, for Jacques Santer, who is a very honorable person, the tragic situation was that he could not dismiss, that's the right word, dismiss, entlassen, to dismiss, could not dismiss the commissioner from France. And there were some scandals, at least we thought there were some scandals. But the Élysée, the President Chirac, did not allow that the president of the commission dismissed the commissioner of the La Grande Nation. So this changed over the years, and now the president of the commission can dismiss a commissioner, and so this was one of those 5 points. So my message is that the winner of the elections, whether it's the socialists or liberals, it will not be so probable, but with the socialists you don't know, and with us you don't know. But anyhow, the president of the commission should represent the result of the elections. And if one can make this clearer to the voters, I think this is one contribution to show them how important the European elections are. This is not a perfect answer, but a step to an answer. And there are many, like in a mosaic, there are many different stones, and we need to make a picture with all these arguments together.
So thank you. We go to the third and last round to Birgit Aser. I presented you before. She's PhD researcher, Department of Law.
Thank you, and sorry for insisting on the sequence, but among ourselves we really divided our questions to represent the past, the present, and the future of the EU, and I really wanted to conclude... Law represents the future, and I wanted to conclude also with the ideas on the future of the European Union. And thank you very much for a very inspiring speech and an even more inspiring essay, as I really recommend everyone reading it. It contains a lot of, might say, ambitious, but also very concrete ideas on how to go on. To name just a few of them, you have argued for harmonization of corporate tax and insolvency law, digital internal market, European Unemployment Insurance Fund, European Employment Agency, the European Monetary Fund, and also, interestingly, European Area of Stability instead of the current EEA. My question comprises of 3 parts, and I hope to have also a second question afterwards. The first is, which of these and also the other ideas that you have presented in this paper do you find the most important? Which one do you find the most important?
First point. What did you mention as a first point? What was your first point?
Of all the things you listed in your paper about the European future and the elements of it, which one, in your opinion, is the most important?
Okay, I understand.
Yeah. And also, which is the most important in the short and in the long term? And do you think they are feasible in the current treaty framework that we are functioning in?
Yeah, okay, so if one would make a priority, the priority would of course be to find a solution for asylum and migration, because this is something which concerns the people most. But a part of that, if you look at the Eurozone, I think it's important to make a further step and to make the European Stability ESM, Europäischer Stabilitätsmechanismus, it's in German, European Stability Mechanism, to develop it further to European Monetary Fund, comparable to the International Monetary Fund. If we would extend the ESM to a European Monetary Fund, then you have 2 pillars. You have one pillar that you can demand from the member states of the European Union reforms where they are necessary, and I think we always need an ongoing process of reforms. Germany as well, we are still having advantage of reforms 10 years back, and we forget sometimes to reform our economic market now. So this is one pillar, and the other pillar is that you can help with the money, like the International Monetary Fund, with the European Monetary Fund, countries who need to be reformed. So I think this is the most important, and I think we can be very happy that we have a president of France now who is very European. And I see in my party that people, or some people, I think the majority would say we should be happy to have Macron, but there are people in my party who say, oh, he is following French interest with his ideas. Of course, every country follows its interest, but imagine if Emmanuel Macron would not be successful, what the alternative would be. It would be Le Front National or Mélenchon from the left. Les extrêmes se touchent. So the extreme right and the extreme left, they are both want to destroy the European Union. And the price for the European Union as such, and the price in a very concrete sense, it would be enormous. So we should do everything, and this is, I'm asking to my compatriots, and I said it some days ago in the board of my party, we should do everything to support and to help Emmanuel Macron. Whether we should do this in the framework of the community, this European Monetary Fund, or in the intergovernmental way, I always would prefer the communitarian method, that the Commission and the Parliament and the Council of Ministers, of course, have a strong role to play. But I don't see at the moment that the governments would accept to develop a European Monetary Fund as an instrument of the European institutions. And then I would say the intergovernment solution is not the best, but the second best. And it's better to have an intergovernmental solution as no solution. And I think we have to be flexible in this. And our former finance minister, Wolfgang Schäuble, who is now the president of the German Bundestag and my successor in the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, the 1st of January will be the outgoing president of the German Bundestag, Norbert Lammert, who is an excellent person, a convinced European. And Wolfgang Schäuble always said, if we can have a communitarian solution in a first step, then let's use the intergovernmental and be open for the future to have in some time the communitarian solution. So I think this is the direction, and I ask our great Italian friends to be supportive, and Italy is a great country, and we should not make the mistake, the Germans and the French, that we give the impression that the two countries want to dominate. All countries in the European Union have to play their role, and I would welcome proposals from Italy as well, and being part of our European dream.
Thank you. Short second question. Still, as a lawyer obsessed with treaties, I would like to, and you have been in such a long time in the European Parliament, there is an average time lapse of 5 to 6 years from the Single European Act on between the European treaties. Yet, I believe it's tomorrow when we are celebrating the anniversary, the 10th anniversary of the signing of the Lisbon Treaty. Do you think that it has been too long? Do you think that we should or should not open up new treaty negotiations to be able to implement all the new ideas? Or is the Lisbon Treaty exhaustive and flexible enough that we can do it?
First of all, Birgit, I thank you very much reminding us and me that it's tomorrow 10 years that the Lisbon Treaty was signed in Lisbon by the heads of government. And it is today exactly, and I didn't think of it, that I had the privilege, together with President Barroso and together with the then Prime Minister of Portugal and President of the European Council, Socrates. I never understood how you pronounce it exactly in Portuguese. Socrates? Yeah, you know, okay. And I know the problems with him at the moment, but it was today exactly 10 years that I had the honor to sign the Charter of Fundamental Rights in Strasbourg. and it was an extraordinary meeting. The Eurosceptics and anti-Europeans in the European Parliament started shouting when we wanted to sign the Charter of Fundamental Rights, and this may have been my most important signature in my life. There were 2 or 3 others in a political sense as well, but maybe the Charter of Fundamental Rights, the signing was the most important. And the Charter of Fundamental Rights became part, as you know, as a lawyer, I studied law myself, and you know the phrase, 3 lawyers, 5 opinions. But anyhow, this I never really worked in the field of law, but I of course followed it always in the framework of the European treaties strongly. So the Charter of Fundamental Rights, by reference of an article, is now part of the Treaty of Lisbon, and this is a great success. There are few countries which are not part of the Charter of Fundamental Rights, of course not the British, and I think not the Polish. So it's a great success to have the Charter of Fundamental Rights. And so your question was whether we should have a new treaty. I don't see at the moment the possibility for a new treaty, and even I would not ask for it, because what we need is a political will. If we have the political will to solve problems, we can do it on the basis on the basis of the Lisbon Treaty. Having a new treaty, which might be perfect, a beautiful European picture, but not solving the problems, would be not a good solution. So I am preferring now not asking for a new treaty. It might come one day, and we could not have every 5 years a new treaty. Then you have the difficult procedures with referenda and so on and so on. In the end, you could have less. And that's why I'm not in favor of the proposals of Martin Schulz now with a new constitution, and he wants to exclude those countries from the European Union who don't accept the European constitution. But it might even not be accepted in Germany, and who in the end constitutes the European Union. So I am deeply convinced that we have to give concrete answers to the challenges we are facing, and we have spoken about it. And if we do this, if the politicians do it, then I think this will be satisfying our citizens, and they might vote with a greater percentage in the European elections in the future. So I ask the political leaders in the European Parliament, in the Commission, in the Council, in the national governments to find solutions for the concrete challenges we are facing.
Thank you very much for the fantastic questions. I would like to ask a question going back to your discourse about the intergovernmental, because don't you think that in these years, this level, which will be also a strong basis to the new European reforms in the heads of Macron and Merkel, don't you think that this intergovernmental level has eroded, has damaged the European institutions, for example, the European Commission? For example, think of 2015, a refugee crisis, which was a constant crisis in Italy, of course. We know much about this crisis. And President Juncker, he proposed already in May to introduce some quotas in Europe. So every country would take his quotas and so on. And this proposal of the European Commission was totally ignored at the European Council of May 2015. 2 months later, Ms. Merkel wrote a letter together with Macron, and they proposed the quotas as it was something new. Why? Because during the summer, the refugees had come over the Balkan countries. So this had become a German problem, a Swedish problem, and so on. So don't you think that this is a perfect example? And then when the quotas were effectively proposed by Merkel, with her strength and her power, Europe adopted it. Then we know that many problems came, but don't you think that this intergovernmental level has always eroded more and more the European institutions, and that this could be also a very great risk for the future?
I think, Tonia, this is not so much a question of institutions or intergovernmentalism or communitarian method. It's a question of psychology. And we need to be a little bit more patient with our eastern neighbors. And I'm speaking from the point of view of Germany, with all criticism which we have now vis-à-vis Poland, with the internal development of the Constitutional Court and so on. I always say to the German politicians, and I said it on the board of my party some days ago, we Germans should be reluctant to criticize Poland because of historic reasons, but the European Commission should do its work and we should support the Commission. And as far as refugees are concerned, the Polish and the Hungarians have no sense for this question. And I think they need some time to get an understanding for migration and so on. And we in our societies, you in Italy, we in Germany, we know to deal with refugees. And in some parts of my country, in Saxony, for instance, Sachsen, Free State of Saxony, not to compare with Lower Saxony, where I come from, we are quite open, but with limits, of course. They don't know foreigners in Saxony. They don't know migrants. They don't know refugees. And so they are opposing it very strongly. So I think the people have to learn and have to get used to these great challenges. And we should not immediately criticize them in a very strong way. But in the end, in some years or some decades, I think everybody has to do what is necessary, and then quotas might be the right thing. But we should help those who accept the refugees, who accept the asylum seekers. We should give them more political and financial help. And it's a totally different situation in the different member states of the European Union as far as this question is concerned. We need to be patient with each other, and you are patient as Italians with the Germans are patient with the Italians, and you know the principle, you are half German, half Italian, so you are an excellent 100% good compromise. You know this comparison with Germans and Italians, the relation between them. The Germans love the Italians but don't respect them. And the Italians respect the Germans but don't love them. So the psychology is in each country a little bit different, and I think we have to take this into consideration a little bit more. Okay. And let's be patient.
So we'll pose your second question, then I would go to maybe if there are questions here. There has been in the crisis two very strong focuses, one on the fiscal side and one on immigration. No? And our president of Il Presidente del Consiglio, Paolo Gentiloni, he said once, and I think it's worth a reflection. He said, why is Europe so severe on the fiscal side? Think of course, the rules about debt and deficit and so on. And they're not as severe as they are on the fiscal side, on the immigration side. What do I mean? Of course, Italy has to be very rigorous on its balance sheet because we have a high debt. But the immigration problem, we know it now. It poses some political questions. It poses some political problems now. We have populism everywhere rising very quickly because of the immigration. So why, you said it now, we have to be patient with the Eastern European countries on refugees. But why be so patient if we have some interior problems on the interior politics? And why, after being so severe on the fiscal side? You know what I mean? I don't know if
I understood. I gave you already the answer, but I did not understand the name of the president.
No, Paolo Gentiloni said once, why are they so severe on us on the fiscal side, and why is nobody is severe with Poland who refuses to take refugees?
Yeah, but I have given already, partly for my country, the answer that we Germans left you, the Italians, alone and you are part of the Germans, so I should not say you, the Italians. You have the double nationality.
Italian question.
So we Germans did not understand the Italian problems and the Greek problems with migration until we had our own problem. And so we left Italy and Greece alone for a long time. And we always insisted on the Dublin Agreement that those countries where the migrants arrive, that those countries have to solve the problem and they have to have the asylum procedure and so on. This works as long as not too many people come. But when many hundreds of thousands come, then Italy or Greece cannot solve this problem alone. It's a problem then for the whole European Union. And for me, the migration challenges and the challenges concerning our economy and Eurozone are totally of equal quality, if I can use this word, and we should severe in both areas, not only with the economy and the Eurozone, but with the migration question as well. We should take both questions serious, and I think if we do that, then we all go into the right direction. Maybe the Germans could be more open for the refugee question and the Italians a little bit more for reform, and then we somewhere meet in the middle.
Thank you. Are there questions from the floor? There is one. The microphone is there, yes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pöttering, for coming to Firenze and visit us here and give us the possibility to ask questions. Martin Schulz didn't only propose a new constitution, but as well the United States of Europe. In your paper here, it seems that you're more in favor of a step-by-step approach. But my question to you is, what's the end game? Do you still believe that there will be one day a United States of Europe? Or do you kind of have a different image of the European Union in mind? Thank you.
Thank you so much. In my early days as a politician, I used the word of the United States of Europe as well, and I even succeeded. I think it was in '92 on the party congress of my party in Dresden that a phrase was accepted that we want a federal Europe as a federal European Union. At that time we still spoke about the European Community because the Maastricht Treaty came into force, I think, in December '93, so we did not speak about the European Union as a United States of Europe. But today I am not speaking about the United States of Europe anymore, because the people think that we would make something similar to the United States of America, and the United States of America are totally different as far as the history is concerned and so on. And with the present president, I think the agreement of our people even would be less, the support would be even less for such an idea. So we have now the word for the European integration, European Union, Europäische Union, European Union, although I liked the word European Community very much as well. But now the final agreement was European Union. Let's stick to that. And the European Union is a concept which is unique. A lawyer would say a concept sui generis, something which is not comparable to anything in the world, and let us try to prevent to say the European Union should be a state. If you say the European Union should be a state, then you have already great opposition. So let's say it's something sui generis, and you have legally many aspects of a federation, but many aspects of a nation, of an intergovernmental cooperation as well. And this has always been the case. The French would not accept a federal European Union. We, as European, I regard myself as a European federalist. I would be totally against an only intergovernmental cooperation. But so we have to find solutions in the middle. And Federica Mogherini is a good example for that as institution, not as a person, as an institution. She is part of the Commission, and she needs a confidence vote of the European Parliament, but she is a proposal of the governments in her position as High Representative. So it's something in between. But I personally would go as far into the communitarian direction if possible. But my criticism to Martin Schulz is not the word United States of Europe so much, but that he wants to exclude countries who don't accept a constitution. Who will accept a constitution? If there are referenda, maybe in Belgium they might accept it, but one can even not be sure in Belgium. The Dutch would not, in a referendum, accept it. The French would not, and the Germans, it's doubtful. So who in the end is left? And this is my criticism to this proposal. And so let's be flexible and let's have a good and a wise combination, what I said in my little speech, between passion and patience. We need both. If you have no patience, no passion, then we have no goal. And if you have no passion, you will never arrive to what you want to achieve. So it's a combination. And for me, it's the major thing. It's important that we solve the problems. And I did not say it so far, that we always must realize that the European Union is not Europe. The European Union is part of Europe, but there are parts of Europe outside the European Union. I made a mistake in many years in my speeches. For 60 years there is peace in Europe. It's wrong. We had war on the Balkans, but it's not part of the European Union. And now we have a war similar situation in East Ukraine. It's not the European Union. In the European Union we have peace because we have a legal basis for the European Union, and the legal basis ensures a peaceful living together and solving problems on a peaceful way. We might discuss it for nights and nights, so we do it not so much anymore as we did when you were born. There were agricultural discussions, the agricultural prices, so this is not so much part of the common agricultural policy anymore. Nights and nights in Brussels, but we did it and we do it on a legal basis, and this means the legal basis ensures the peace, and this is unique in the world. And I think we should defend this much more as we did in the past, and we should, in a modest way, much more self-confident. If we lose our self-confidence, then we will lose everything. So let's, with all the mistakes and everything in the personal life, in a political life is not perfect, but this is a better part of the world and we have to defend it. And this is what we have to do.
Thank you very much. There is time for one short question and short answer.
It's a real pleasure to meet you here in Florence, in the European Institute. Monica Baldi, as you know. So it's a real pleasure, and I'd like to ask you, because in your speech, you are very clear to say it's important, the richness of diversity and culture, and the importance of Europe. As you know, now in Europe, some countries are creating some tension. I speak about Visegrad and other countries. So what do you think it could be the focus next year approaching the new European campaign?
Thank you, Monica. I am very happy to see you again. If I would say you have not changed, it would come very much near to the truth. But with your head, I did not immediately realize you, but now I realize you. We were colleagues in the European Parliament, and Monica, I'm very happy to see you here. We have, you mentioned the Visegrad countries, and in the Visegrad countries, there are some people who have the idea to build a Central Europe from the north, from the Baltic countries to the south, maybe to Hungary or even including Bulgaria and Romania. I am totally against such a geographic division of Europe. And once head of government, I'm not mentioning the name because it would be indiscreet, he said to me, let's build such a structure from north to the south, from the Baltic countries to the south, plus Germany. And I almost could have killed this person, and I said, you will never allow us, or I would never allow you to separate the Germans from the French, because if there is not a good cooperation and a friendship partnership between France and Germany, then the European Union is finished. I would not say they should do the job alone. This would be dangerous. They should never dominate the European Union, but if France and Germany do not go together, there is no future. So I think we have to stay together. And that's why I say we have to be a little bit more patient with our Eastern partners, whether they may be from Hungary or from Poland, and where there is some darkness, there's always some light as well. For instance, the new leader of Fidesz in the parliament in Budapest is Gergely Gyulás. He is a very convinced European, and he was proposed to be chairman of his group by Viktor Orban. And I told him, when he told me that Viktor Orban proposed him to be leader of the group of the Fidesz in the Hungarian parliament, I said, please bring my regards to Viktor Orban, and that he won some points back now from me. So I think and this, Monica, was your question, if I understood it correctly. I think for the election campaign for the European Parliament in 2019, we should tell our citizens first what it means to live in a community that is based on values. This is very important. In America, they speak about deals, or the president speak about deals. So deals means interests. But if you have no values, what are then finally your interests? If money is the only value, then finally you will get lost. So I say first values, and the interests follow the values. This is the first point. And then solving the different challenges we have. I spoke about migration, I spoke about the Eurozone, I spoke about the defense union, and if we make progress in these areas, I think we are on the right track. And then a last point, and Professor Bardi asked me this morning, I think we spoke about it, I'm not totally sure, but I think the integration of the Balkan countries, which is very important for Italy, for Bulgaria, and so on. So we should learn from the past, and history is always a lesson for the future. I think we made a mistake with Bulgaria and Romania. They became members too early because they did not fulfill the legal criteria, and too much corruption and so on. So I'm not in favor of any corruption. So they became members of the Union too early. But we always were friendly to those representatives, and that's Europe. And so in the end, it's good that they are members of the Union. If Romania and Bulgaria would not be part of the European Union, the appetite from Moscow of President Putin concerning those countries would be even greater as the appetite is now. But what the West Balkan countries, Serbia, Albania, Macedonia, Bosnia-Herzegovina is concerned, we should identify political objects which can be accepted by those countries without becoming immediately member of the European Union. For instance, roaming, the reduction of the prices for mobiles. Then the participation in the Erasmus program. It's one of the greatest achievements of the European Union, the Erasmus program. I always opposed, as chairman of our group, and you may remember, the reduction of the Erasmus program. And now we have, for this period, 2013-2020, 14 billion euros for Erasmus. This is a great development. And in my time, they wanted to reduce it for the perspectives 2007-2013, and we resisted. And another project, Energy Union. So those countries should be part of an energy union, and so we could bring them nearer to us. And on the Balkans, we see an increasing influence, not only by Russia, but by China, but by Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. And if we want that they have a European orientation, we have to do something to be successful. And the Bulgarian presidency, which will start the 1st of January 2018, is thinking on this line. So I think these subjects should be part of the election campaign. And will you be a candidate for the European Parliament again? You don't know. So you are still so young. My advice is be a candidate for the European Parliament. We need good people in the European Parliament.
Thank you to a great European and German politician, Hans-Gert Pöttering. Thank you to the School of Transnational Governance. I wish you good luck, of course. And thank you to our researchers, and have a good time here.